right, welcome to another episode of FUELcast TV. I'm your host, Ian Murphy. This is where we talk about everything that's freedom, unity, entertainment, and liberty related. Lately, I've kind of been talking about freedom of speech and some things that are kind of related to that. There's two subjects that I want to go over today, talk about a little bit. One of them is I don't want to say breaking news because that sounds stupid, but I do have some inside information about a previous guest that we'd had on. But first, I want to talk about, you know, so much is being talked about in the media, with Twitter files and suppressed speech and compelled speech with things like pronouns and stuff like that. It's important to always talk about why free speech matters. And I always say, and I'm not the only one, obviously, that there's a reason why it's the First Amendment, because it kind of is absolute. If you have the freedom to speak your mind, obviously without putting somebody in harm's way, you can't shout fire in a theater, right? There's a reason why it's the First Amendment. Also, it's important that logic prevails, right? We're getting further and further away from what has been settled logic on a lot of things. And this is, I think, a mechanism that's being used to kind of curb or silence free speech or try and silo some forms of free speech. And law is generally grounded in logic. Of course, not always, but usually that is the case, or at least both parties can agree when passing legislation that this is the baseline for such logic in order to pass this legislation. Right when they upped the speed limit on I-75, there was a lot of data that was brought forth that said the 5-mile-an-hour difference, given the safety with cars and seatbelts and airbags and all this stuff, which they then in turn allowed them to make the legislative decision to raise the freeway speed up here in northern Michigan to 75, not 70. So that they kind of had a general consensus that logic says, with this data and this set of facts and science now says, we can go ahead and move forward with raising that speed limit. So having said that, there's two interesting dynamics that are at play. Some people may have been reading about the scuff up between Dana Nessel, my pal, Dana Nessel, and a reporter from the Detroit News, Charlie LaDuff. I don't know Charlie. I've read some of his work. I think he's a pretty good journalist. I don't know. He may tend to lean one way or the other. Again, I don't follow enough of his work. Sorry, Charlie. But I'll probably be paying a little bit more attention now. But recently, there have been an investigation happening at the Department of the Attorney General, and I wouldn't say a close confidant, but a friend of the Attorney General was under investigation for some nursing home things. And there was consequently a firewall that was put up, but there looks like there might be some impropriety happening there, that maybe the Attorney General was trying to maybe shelve this investigation because she does know the party that was involved. So the Attorney General's office sent a letter back to the Detroit News, basically stating that Charlie LaDuff's piece was filled with falsehoods, and that they shouldn't have to correct so many falsehoods. Now, I think that this might have been posted in the op-ed section. I can't remember. But anyway, so consequently, throughout this back and forth, this investigation and Charlie putting out this article and being published, Gary Miles, I think is his name, Gary Miles, for Detroit News, he's the editor and publisher, received a response from the Department of the Attorney General's office, again, stating that we shouldn't have to point out all of these falsehoods in this article and yada, yada. Well, in response to that, Charlie put out a tweet. And let me see if I can find the tweet really quick. And I'll just read it off. So Charlie tweets in response to Gary Miles' tweet about the response from the Attorney General's office. Charlie then tweets, quote tweets, "Well, the jury's in, Madam Attorney General. See you next Tuesday." Quote, "I don't know whose editorial standards Nestle's office is citing, but it certainly wasn't citing ours. We do expect commentary to be grounded in facts. In fact, the false or misleading statements in the letter the Attorney General's office sent to us render it ineligible to run on our opinion pages as a letter to the editor." Um, that is a quote from Gary Miles, unquote. That is a quote from Gary Miles, the publisher and editor of the Detroit News. So what he is saying is that their response it isn't even worthy of republishing in the Detroit News opinion pages. So Charlie says, "Well, the jury is in, Madam Attorney General. See you next Tuesday," which is a colloquialism for cunt. If we're gonna say it, we're gonna say it, right? Um, this is where some interesting dynamics come into play, right? You have a journalist that is speaking about the subject of an article that he wrote. Um, I think the language is a little ridiculous. I think he's losing a little bit of credibility. There are calls all over the place for him to be fired or for him to resign. Um, I think that's a decision, that the editorial board is going to probably have a look at. If the outrage warriors have their way, he would be 86th yesterday. Me personally, I think he has the right to say this. It was a tweet. I think it was kind of a stupid ass tweet. Again, I think he loses credibility as a journalist, regardless of how good or bad his prior reporting has been, which I think is on par and is good. Again, I don't know if it's great, but this starts to chip away at the foundation of his credibility by using that phrase, "See you next Tuesday." Especially when he's talking about a person that he wrote this story about. Now, it seems like it's a little bit personal. And again, I understand that this is an individual who, said things about me and my business. I've never met the woman. We've never been in the same room together that I know of. But I have a stack of papers with her name stamped all over it, attacking my business for the last 3 years, essentially. Which again was why I kind of find this fascinating. So here we have a case of free speech where a journalist is saying, see you next Tuesday," calling her a CUNT. That's how much I don't like that word. It's extremely derogatory. I mean, I shouldn't have to explain why, but he felt like he was within his privy to use that "see you next Tuesday." Literally typed out "see you next Tuesday." Fine, great. So he's done it. I think the tweet is now deleted, which also says something about it. So maybe there's some tweet regret happening there. But I will say, you put it out there, dude. Come on, stand by it at least. I know you can't because it's ridiculous. The problem is that you're diverting the conversation that you started in the Detroit News with this piece. So now we don't even get the opportunity to even have the discussion legitimately about the article and about this investigation being pushed aside if it really was. Now it's all about Charlie, the journalist, and his response to this nonsense. Instead of maybe being the bigger person and saying, well, maybe we're over the target here. Instead, now the target is on him. And it allows the opposite side, if you will, to now use his language against him. And it makes him look like a fool. And it gives the other side more fodder to say, well, look at how ridiculous these people are. They're unhinged. So it does start to erode away at his credibility moving forward with any type of unbiased journalism that he might be able to produce. Now, I'm sure there are people that are going to say, well, he was already biased to begin with. And maybe that's true. Again, I don't know Charlie. I've seen some of his stuff, but it seems like he may have erred this time. And now the conversation is about something completely different and not really what it is supposed to be about, which is what we, the voters, care about. And we, the voters and Dana Nessel's constituents in Michigan, need to know about, right? There are a lot of things that are going through that office that need to have the sun shined on them. And that's, I think, what this was an attempt to do by the Detroit News and by Charlie LaDuff, to kind of hold this administration's feet to the fire, saying there's not a lot of transparency. Look what happened over here at the office of the Attorney General's office. So you're not doing it. You're not doing yourself any favors. I honestly hope that he doesn't get fired, but I can understand if the editorial board does decide to terminate his contract or his employment there. So that's one. Free speech matters. I don't agree with his free speech, but I do agree that he should be allowed to say those things in an open forum. Again, I don't agree with him. I've been involved in litigation with this person, Dana Nessel, for the last 2.5, coming up on 3 years, basically. I certainly don't view her that way, even though I have my feelings about her. But that is a very personal thing and a very derogatory term to use. So I think that was a pretty big mistake to use there. So that's the other one. So we have had conversations about a salon in Traverse City, Michigan, called Studio 8 Hair Lab. The owner, Christine Geiger, has been on FUELcast before. She, back in July of this year, took to her business's Facebook page and had relayed some comments on her business's Facebook page. This is a small business in a little strip mall area in Traverse City, and so I'll catch you up really quick. And this is what she posted. We'll try and throw it up on the screen because I'm sure we've got it somewhere from the previous podcast. But this was, I think, July 8th. She posted on Facebook: "If a human identifies as anything other than a man or a woman, please seek services at a local pet groomer. You are not welcome at this salon, period. Should you request to have a particular pronoun used, please note we may simply refer to you as, hey, you. Regardless of Michigan House Bill 4744, there's emojis used, so it's a kissy emoji, kiss my ass, Governor Witchmere, smiley emoji. This is America, free speech. This small business has the right to refuse services. We are not bound to any oaths as realtors are regarding discrimination. My recent airport experience validates this, smiley emoji. Hashtag take a stand, hashtag Garrett Soldano." She then followed it up with another Facebook post after I think some reaction had come into the first one, saying, this is what she says: "I have no issues with the L, G, and B. It's the T, the Q, and the plus that I'm not going to support. For those that don't know what the plus is for, it's for MAP, minor attracted persons, aka pedophile. This stance was taken to ensure that clients have the best experience, and I am admitting that since I am not willing to play the pronoun game or cater to requests outside what I perceive as normal, this probably isn't the best option for that type of client. There are over 800 licensed stylists in the county. There are plenty of salons and stylists willing to cater to what I will not. This is a free country, and I am not a slave to any narrative. Conservatives need to acclimate these woke individuals to their new reality. Conservatives have had enough," emphasis attached on that, "have had enough of their ideologies being projected onto us. We used to just let them be. Most of us keep our opinions to ourselves. I mean, why look for unnecessary conflict, right? Well, the other side used this against us. They mistook our silence for weakness and where we stand on these issues. They can't handle it. They aren't prepared for this. So I am more than willing to take the first rounds of strikebacks in hopes that more of you will see this and be inspired to stand up tall and speak your own truths and not simply let them be. Again, this is a Facebook post from Christine Geiger, the owner of Studio 8 Hair Lab in Traverse City, Michigan. This was back on July, I believe July 8th. She said this, and there was quite some outrage about these comments after she had posted them. So much so that I believe the mayor of Traverse City may have come out and made some comments. Dana Nessel, the attorney general, has made some comments regarding her comments. There is a law in Michigan called the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. There is also an ordinance in the city of Traverse City regarding gender identity. It's a non-discrimination ordinance, actually. Codified Ordinance of Traverse City, Chapter 605. And they talk about a person's biological makeup. So since Christine has come on the podcast, it's been a little while. I have learned that at least three individuals, have filed civil rights complaints against Studio 8 Hair Lab, specifically pointing to this Facebook post. I've been provided with documents. We've redacted the information of these three individuals that have filed these civil rights complaints, specifically citing this Facebook post. Again, these are individuals that were never denied a service. They are simply saying that their civil rights were violated upon reading a Facebook post on Facebook. So they filed a complaint through the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. So what consequently has happened is three separate investigations have now been opened up regarding these comments in Studio 8 Hair Lab. Now, in these documents, they are requesting that Christine preserve all digital correspondence and media related to this issue. They have sent a questionnaire. They are attempting to compel her to answer interrogatories. They have virtually refused to offer the statutes and the citations regarding the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. So what happens in these cases is somebody's aggrieved. Usually these cases come out of, say, a Black woman being discriminated against for housing. She was denied a lease, or he was denied a lease because of the color of his skin, or because of their religion, for example. These three individuals that have filed a civil rights complaint citing the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act are using, I believe, the sex portion, or they may believe they're using the gender identity portion of the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, which was passed, I believe, this year and then is set to sine die, I believe, sometime in the first of the year. I think the legislative session may end here in November. So then that will take effect then. So three separate investigations have been opened up, the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. Now, this is where I find it interesting. This is a executive branch agency, so it sits under the governor's branch that investigates these allegations of violations of civil rights. So a Facebook post from a small business owner in Traverse City, Michigan, simply stating, if you don't identify as a man or a woman, you should seek services at a pet groomer. So people saw that and said, "You're a bigot." They got overly emotional and said, "You must not like the lesbians, the gays, the bis, any of those individuals because you won't accept somebody that identifies themselves as, I'm guessing what she's saying must be a dog or a cat or a hamster or a gerbil or a giraffe. I don't know. I don't care. I always say you can identify as whatever you want, but at what level do I need to participate in your self-esteem?" Um, so she's never said that she's denying service to any of the previous, and that's what her subsequent post said, or was trying to outline, is that the lesbian, gay, and bisexual community is always welcome at her salon. It's basically her religion that does not allow her to continue allowing services or offering services to those other portions of that community. And again, she cites that there's other places to do that. So here we have a person's free speech and what appears to be a person's right to their religion coming into play with a person's right around their gender identity or something like that. So what is happening is Christine is getting letters upon letters asking her to basically give her side of the story. What's interesting about this civil rights department versus, say, the liquor commission or, say, the health department, or in my case, again, the Department of Agriculture, the administrative law procedures in my cases, you don't get to bring, say, constitutional questions beforehand. We had to go through the administrative law and they said, sorry, we just can't address those questions here. But at least the Administrative Procedures Act gave us an avenue to appeal to a circuit court. And that's where, of course, the Iron Pig won and had an unconstitutional ruling against the health department, where we've also petitioned our local health department to have the local statutes overturned. So here comes the Civil Rights Department, and their process looks a little bit different. But what they're attempting to do is to basically put Christine on trial without ever really getting to the core of the issue. There is a lot to uncover in this, a lot to unpack, because some of this is so new. The changing of Elliot Larson happens next year. I don't know if these individuals that filed these complaints were under the impression that those changes had already taken effect. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens moving forward. Now, it sounds like Christine has been sending some questions back to the Department of Civil Rights, asking them to point out which statutes they are citing, what statutes allow, because it looks like there's fines attached to some of this stuff. Now, the Traverse City non-discrimination, I think it's maybe $100 fine, but the Civil Rights Department has access to civil infractions of anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 per infraction. Now, these are things that could put a business go bankrupt, right? I mean, $150,000 potentially is what she could be looking at. Now, I'm not saying she's a victim. She willfully took to Facebook, a social media platform, town square, if you will, and took a position and said, I will not service a customer that doesn't identify as a man or woman. You can identify whatever spectrum you want to, as long as it's somewhere on that apparently human XX or XY spectrum there. You figure it out. She's just saying, if you don't want a poodle haircut, if you want a poodle haircut, you just, I'm not going to give it to you. Sorry, it violates my religion. So it looks like there's going to be an interesting test of the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, and it looks like the department has put a pin in these three cases. Now, hopefully I'll be able to throw up the link here, but there is rumblings and some recent articles published about how far behind the MDCR is in Michigan with regards to adjudicating these cases. But somehow, here we are in October, and this happened in July. Sounds like these notices started coming within 30 days. So clearly there is somebody at MDCR or somebody in the executive branch saying, look at what's happening here. Let's pull this to the top of the list. This is something that we need to make sure is taken care of, because we just passed this legislation that involves sexual identity now, gender identity, whatever. So you have to juxtapose these two situations that we're talking about here. The Charlie LaDuff investigation into what's going on with Dana Nessel's office and potentially shelving an investigation into a friend, probably a political donator as well. I haven't read enough into that investigation to really say. Kind of just on the surface. We don't have enough time to get into that anyways. So you have on one hand the shelving of an investigation in her own department. How far out of the possibility would it be for her, who has already made public comment about Studio 8 and Christine? She's already made these comments. Are you that naive to think that she or somebody in the department didn't expedite these three? There's three separate and potentially more. I hear there's a rumor maybe that there's a dozen. But these three somehow bubbled up to the top when there are many, I want to say there's at least 600 other critical cases that are ahead of these. If the report that I'd have to go back and read that report again, I'll try and throw the link in the comment section after this. But so you have to look at these two things. You have to look at the politicization, whatever, of the whole issue surrounding Elliott Larson and them amending it this year, including gender identity. The fervor around these comments and how they were taken out of context to include lesbian, gays, and bisexuals, and not the trans, queers, and pluses that she was mentioning. Her own words, not mine. I'm not trying to speak on her behalf. This is what she said. This is what she said on her own podcast. I'm looking at it from a free speech point of view. Free speech has to include speech that you don't like and that you don't agree with, and heaven forbid that it should break your brittle heart or feelings or cause you to clutch your pearls. Again, I'm not agreeing with "see you next Tuesday" being used to talk about a political official like that. How are you ever going to have any sort of integrity when you're trying to have a discussion or an investigation or a piece written about Dana Nessel again, or even anybody in her office? It's stupid, Charlie. That was just dumb. Then you have somebody like Christine, who is taking a position based on her religion, saying, my religion just simply doesn't allow me to offer services to these people. Now, the other portion that I think is interesting to this is the majority of the folks that are upset with Christine and her comments, including probably these three individuals that filed these civil rights complaints. I am sure that they look at themselves as extremely tolerant individuals. How is it so that if you are so tolerant that you cannot understand and tolerate a person's religious point of view? And this is not a minority point of view, I believe, especially when it comes to the religious aspect of it. So, how is it that you can be so hypocritical? It's mind boggling that the hypocrisy that is being shown everywhere today, it's everywhere. This is why it's like, let's make logic great again, please. Language is important, words are important. The way we use them are important. The way that we interpret free speech is important, because without individuals like a Christine that is standing up for her point of view, you don't have to like it. You don't have to like it. But it is protected free speech. It simply is. It is also right to religion. There's a couple of different avenues on this whole thing. So moving forward, it's going to be interesting to see if charges are going to be issued. As far as the information that I have been given, Christine has not appeared in any investigation or any Zoom or any hearing. She has not had any formal charges filed against her. Again, they are trying to compel interrogatories from her, which are basically meaning we want you to answer these questions. We want your point of view. Why do you feel like you're not discriminating against person A, person B, and person C? And you have to ask the question, how did these three cases jump the list of discrimination cases in Michigan? Because you know that there are real cases of discrimination. Now, when I say real, I mean actual consequences from discriminatory actions. Simple things like refusing to put ADA requirements in a bathroom. Those things are required for handicapped individuals to be able to use the restroom. I know this because we went through this when we remodeled the restaurant to open back in 2017. The old restaurant, when it was built, didn't have ADA bathrooms. So now we have a women's restroom with 2 stalls. We have a unisex bathroom that has a baby changing station and is handicap accessible. We had to do that by law. If I didn't do that, or actually my landlord didn't do that, a civil rights complaint could be filed against them saying you didn't accommodate me. That's a real world implication. You can take it one step further than the one I mentioned before about a black woman in Detroit being denied a lease or a mortgage or a rental car or even a haircut because somebody said, I can't do it. I'm sorry. You're a black person. You're a derogatory term inserted here person. I'm not going to cut your hair. I'm not going to shave your head. I'm not going to give you a tattoo. You can't sit at my bar because you're of Jewish descent. If you want to get real. Those are actual real world damages, things that happen. And that's why the Michigan Department of Civil Rights actually has a job to do. How is it so? You can't tell me that all those other cases and complaints that are sitting out there that were ahead of Studio 8 Hair Lab were just nothing burgers, and that these three were so important because a Facebook post offended 3 people in the Antrim County, Traverse City area that they felt compelled to file at least 3 different complaints against a small business owner that cuts hair in Traverse City, Michigan. It's bonkers. We know that free speech is under attack. The part that we have to be wary of is which speech is being targeted. This to me is like the equivalent of the definition of fair. There is no definition of fair because what's fair to me is not what you define as fair either. You can't put a definition on that. This is the same thing that we're seeing here. So I'll keep everybody up to date on the information that I get from that situation. We'll see what happens with Charlie LaDuff. If he ends up losing his job or if he ends up going maybe the smarter route and becoming an independent journalist. We see that happening more and more every day. I wouldn't say it's in vogue, but I think that it is kind of heading that direction. Um, so we'll keep you in touch with all of these different things that's going on. Again, freedom, unity, entertainment, liberty. These are the things we like to discuss. Freedom of speech. Certainly, as we sit here talking about these things on a platform that allows me to say some of the dumbass things out there that I get to, free speech is important. And you don't always have to like what I have to say. And I don't always have to like what other people say, but you have to at least respect the fact that we get to say these things. And when you look at other countries that don't have quite the same ability for us to say things in open air and on platforms like this, we have to be careful of the slippery slope. And that's what this is. This is a very slippery slope to the offended, to the pearl clutchers, to all of these things. When they say words hurt, I believe Chris Rock said it best. Words hurt when they're written on a brick. And that's how I'm going to end it. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. FUELcast TV. I'm your host, Ian Murphy. We've got all kinds of stuff online. Please subscribe to any platform where you listen or watch podcasts. We're Spotify, YouTube, Locals, all those great places. We'll keep you up to date what's going on. Check us out. FUELcasttv.com is where to find all of our episodes. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you later.